Okay, let's bring in former Republican Congressman Francis Rooney of Florida and Michael Steele, former RNC chair, MSNBC political analyst, and host of the Michael Steele podcast. Michael, my friend, I got to go to you first because it's like deja vu all over again. Is that the, is that the same? Because you lived through the first iteration of the Tea Party. And the reason I started out talking about what happened with the government shutdown, they actually shut it down again in 2013, was that this was about an ultra right-wing group of politicians who were new to politics and who, as Lawrence O'Donnell described it last night, had a kind of magical thinking that they could come to Washington and suddenly they could make the Department of Education go away, right? Like they could defund the IRS and do all these things. Well, lo and behold, this fight with the same group, the Freedom Caucus, what the Tea Party turned into, these are what they're asking for. This is what McCarthy's agreed to. A motion to vacate the chair upon one member's support, meaning one person could essentially trigger a vote of no confidence at any time. Representation for the Freedom Caucus on committees, including rules, meaning the Tea Party and the people who supported the insurrection would make the rules for the House. No leadership involvement in safe Republican primaries that are open seats. And that's because McCarthy's PAC supported some moderate-ish Republicans against some people who would be considered far right. And then you have a church commission-style committee to target weaponized government, meaning they want to investigate things like the FBI for trying to get the classified documents back from Trump. When you look at that, and also they want major cuts to future spending bills, which is what the Tea Party wanted too. They want to trigger gutting government. They want to cut food stamps and other things and have must-pass administration to stop Biden from doing whatever. This feels to me like this is just a continuation of the Tea Party fight, and that in the end, the Tea Party and the insurrectionists have won.
Well, it is and it isn't to some degree. I think that, the Tea Party that I was involved with in 2009 and 2010, the vast majority of those members are no longer in Congress. That 63-seat majority is gone. In fact, the majority of those 63 seats were not effectively Tea Party members per se. It was about a third of that of that group. So you're looking at some of the remnants narratively. This is very different, though. The emphasis and the thrust of it is very different than what we've seen. The one common thread, though, Joy, that's important for folks to really understand and contextualize, and the congressman I know will appreciate this, is that there are a lot of folks who for many, many years, not just in this moment, but going back 20, 30 years, going back to the Reagan term, who felt that the Republican leadership in the House especially, which led to the growth what we saw in 1994 with Newt Gingrich, felt that the leadership in the House never paid attention to what their cause was, what was important to them about their approach to governing, their approach to spending, their approach to the Constitution. And so there were two things that were always at stake. One was respect for what we think are valuable, the things we see as valuable, and two was leverage. Where do we get the leverage? And we saw in the last two big speakers fights, they fell short on both. Now they have both, and they're using it. They're using the respect that they've gotten and that's put them in that position by their base voters outside of the Congress, and using that to create the leverage on Kevin McCarthy. And so that's when you look at that list, it's interesting, particularly if you put the list back up. I can tell you one little thing I find to be very funny was when they're talking about, how they want to position the power and the structure of things. I remember going to the Tea Party and saying, look, you can't take out my incumbents, right? We're not going to win these races in these other states if you keep challenging us so they were doing exactly what they accused Kevin McCarthy of doing to them. Now they were doing to the party in 2010. And so I had to negotiate with them. You get behind our incumbents. If you guys win the primary, we'll stand behind them. But we can't go at this fight in which you take out, guys like Mike Castle across the country in races where we know we're not going to keep that seat otherwise. Yeah. So that's where we find ourselves right now.
Well, they took out Eric Cantor. That was the other one of the young guns, right? The three young guns were Paul Ryan, Eric Cantor, and Kevin McCarthy. So, I mean, the irony, welcome to the show, Congressman Rooney, former Congressman Rooney, because that's kind of the irony, right? You had this Tea Party group who they were outside of government people who wanted to come in at the base level, who really wanted to cut government to the bone. And the people who agreed with them at that were people like the Koch brothers, who are willing to fund things like the Tea Party Express, because they also would like to cut government because they don't want to pay a lot of taxes, right? So they had a common goal. But their thinking was that the reason that you couldn't get rid of the Department of Education, the Department of Energy, and just get rid of it is that Republicans just weren't fighting hard enough. This will be familiar to a lot of liberal Democrats who say the same thing about the Democratic Party, is that if they would just fight harder, right, they could do certain things. But the things that the far right wanted to do. I mean, let me just read you this real quick. This is a Dear Colleague letter on the demands to check the Biden agenda. This is in December. They want to end vaccine mandates, but also reinstate and protect discharged service members. So get rid of the vaccine mandates. The Farm Bill must reform food stamp welfare programs and block Chinese government land buying. The debt ceiling must implement spending caps. Appropriations bills must utilize the power of the purse to actually stop the border insurgency, restore energy freedom, block the hiring of more IRS personnel. It's magical thinking to think you can simply stop the hiring at the IRS, somehow make the border stop having migrants coming. But they believe that if they had the right leader, they could do it.
They're crazy, okay? When I was there, I was the only member out of 435 to vote against every farm subsidy. There were as many Republicans as Democrats voting for all this garbage, and Michael Steele knows that in spades more than I do. We have a schism between hard right and conservative Republicans, just like the Democrats have their schism. We just don't seem to be able to figure out how to handle it. I said to Nancy one day, if we had you, we would do a lot better than what we've done.
True. No, you're right, because you know what? What you said there, I think, is so smart.
We could put them together, man.
It's right, and because if you had the right leader is actually an important point, because there is nothing more herd of cats diverse than the Democratic Party. It's every kind of person. It's racially diverse.
But
it's regionally diverse.
Difference.
But they have Nancy Pelosi.
Yes, and she believes in things.
That's true.
Kevin McCarthy has never introduced a bill. He doesn't have any policy chops, no views, no nothing. He's Lyndon Johnson on steroids here. And that's a problem. How do you lead with no principles? Nancy Pelosi has great principles.
Yeah. No.
Paul Ryan had great principles.
Real quick, lightning round. How do you think this ends, Congressman Rooney, knowing these folks? How does this end? Does Kevin McCarthy end up getting the speakership?
I would say, first of all, the war of attrition didn't work out for Hitler or Napoleon. Let's see what McCarthy can do. It depends on the never McCarthy people. Are they tough enough to hold out? Because if they are, the white knight's going to come from left field. And I'm sure Michael Steele can elaborate on this better than I can. But there's a couple of white knights lurking out there waiting to pounce. And they're ready to go.
Spill the tea, Michael Steele. How does this end?
Yeah, I think Congressman Rooney is absolutely right. There are stalking horses who are stalking carefully. They do not want to be positioned as if they're trying to take out Kevin. They want Kevin to take himself out by virtue of not being able to negotiate the deal. And when that collapses, that's why we're now in the 11th vote.
Yeah.
Trust me, Kevin, if you didn't get
it
in
one
the
more
first 10, baby.
Go ahead. Last word to you, Congressman.
The fellow that came on before we came on, when he said, what must we look at to the rest of the world? Whoa, was he underestimating now? Super sad.
I mean, we look disorganized. I mean, I will use that. I'm going to be nice. I'm going to try to be Christian with it. We look disorganized.